I think it's patience. You have to be very patient. Things don't materialize immediately. I think it took us before we even got into our first store from the time we created our idea was probably like 4 years because we created the idea in 2019 and then we didn't get into our first store until 2023. So it took us a really long time. And even with that, we had trouble with now we're in retail stores. So now we're learning firsthand what it's like to deal with retailers, what we need to set a clear MSRP. How can we have clear communication? Those type of things are what led us to really evaluate and think about how we're going to proceed with just 4 bars. So I think having that patience and understanding that things don't materialize immediately is something that's very crucial when you're starting in business, especially since, nothing's guaranteed.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Marcus Washington. And Marcus started his journey wanting to do financial consulting with with businesses, and so went into college studying both accounting and I think food science is a double major. It started out doing that, dropped the accounting portion along the way, and but also got into doing some website development as well during college, and then afterwards was going to go doing the vertical farm business, but that didn't necessarily work out with the COVID. So switched gears a bit with his wife and started focusing on a food bar business. Also studied an MBA during that period of time. The website was still up and going, and they started to reach out more on the food bar business, and had the opportunity to do food consulting part time before doing the moving over and doing the food consulting full time, as well as doing the food bar business. So, with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Marcus.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Hey, excited to have you on. So, well, I just gave the 30-second version to a much longer journey. So why don't we rewind and unpack that just a little bit and tell us a little bit more about how your journey got started? Oh, looks like we may have lost your audio there for a second. All right, so we're back. We had a slight amount of technical difficulties, which always happens every so often, but we're back, and Mark was just kicking things off and telling us a bit more about how his journey got started. So tell us a little bit more about how the journey got started, Marcus.
Yeah, so I wanted to own a food business. I didn't really know what food business I wanted to go into. So my advisor suggested I do food science. And really the where the accounting portion came in is I was going to do agricultural economics and accounting double major at OSU. But then she said that you could double major with anything. So I just decided to do food science and accounting based on her recommendation. And so after that, I really realized that food science and accounting were two completely different fields. And I said, okay, well, which one am I more passionate about? And it ended up being food science for me. And so then after that, I took a few food safety classes, really started to like food safety, went and did the Oklahoma Food Innovation Competition, which is where we came up with our product now that is just 4 bars. So in that,
So now,
we
yeah, walk us through.
create,
So what you got, or the now this was the food competition. That was while you were still studying or in school. Is that right?
yep, yeah. So that was in 2019.
So and walk us
Um,
through what was the competition, or kind of what did you enter into it?
So in that was the product that we have now, which is just 4 bars, and essentially it was a fruit bar at the time. It had 3 ingredients or less. I think we had an almond, cherry, and dates flavor, and then we also had a dates, apple, and blueberry or something like that. We had some flavors that were like only fruit, and then we had some that incorporated nuts.
Hmm.
So now that's kind of developed into 4 ingredients or less, which is the apple, apricot, um, and then we have a dates and honey, And then there's another which is cherries, almond, dates, and honey as well. So those have been our two primary flavors. We have other flavors that are still under development, but the food innovation competition we entered in went up against a bunch of different food products. We were judged in front of panels of other either entrepreneurs, food industry leaders, restaurateurs, and we ended up placing fourth place. So that's what really
Hmm.
kickstarted us into our journey.
So now you say, okay, you entered into the competition. Lou would have loved to take first, but nonetheless had a good experience with that, and went up against some big players, and were able to hold your own, so to speak. So now, as you did that, where did you, or you said you kind of gave you some inspiration or motivation to continue on, but kind of walk us through where did you pick things up after the competition?
Yeah, so after the competition, we decided let's start a business around this and around the vertical farming idea that we had. So really, we wanted to do vertical farming because the summer prior to the food innovation competition, I had an assignment in one of my classes that was basically creating an agritourism idea that was based in Oklahoma. And so my idea was, okay, let's create a farm that's virtual so that way it's a physical place that people can visit, but people can also visit it virtually. And
Hmm.
so both of those ideas we kind of consolidated into one business, but that business never ended up getting off the ground simply because we just had some issues with COVID happening for one, and then trying to secure funding during that time was difficult. So we kind of just put it to the side.
Hmm.
And then after that, we essentially determined, okay, where we still had the website up, we still had it to where people could view and look at things. And then one of my classmates that was in my MBA classes, he actually was one of the marketing managers for the Oklahoma City University dining campus.
Hmm.
And so he saw our website, and then basically he liked our product, and then that's when we started entering back into commercialization, and then we started just four bars after that as a result of the interest that had been kind of generated from there.
So now you say, okay, so left the website up and going, even if the overall business didn't necessarily pan out, or timing wasn't right, and there other things that didn't quite work out, but you continued on. So now at some point, remind me in here, graduated and shifted gears, started working with your wife on a business, and also went and got an MBA. So kind of help us to unpack that a bit.
Yeah, so I graduated with my master's from Oklahoma State in May of 2022. My wife, she got her degree in nonprofit leadership, her master's as well, and she graduated in 2021. And so most of this happened during my undergraduate. I got started in 2018, finished my undergraduate in 2020. I graduated a little bit early because I took a lot of like dual enrollment AP classes in high school. And so then by the time she graduated in 2021, I had started working for a equipment manufacturer that sold like testing equipment similar to what they'd use for COVID tests.
Hmm.
And so during this time, I was looking at getting an MBA because I had graduated with my master's, or I'm sorry, I was going to graduate with my master's. I graduated with my bachelor's early. And I was like, since I'm graduating so early, I don't have as much student loan debt. I might as well go for another degree because I have the time, the opportunity, and then the money will be as if I just got my bachelor's and my master's originally.
Hmm.
And so started my MBA at Oklahoma City University because she got her master's there. And I decided, I think it'd be a good school based off of her interactions. So then I started my master's in the fall of 2022. And then that's when Just for Bars got started, was that December of 2022.
So now you say, okay, so you go and you finish up the degrees and you packed in. Sounds a little bit of a kindred spirit. And I always, every time I was doing in school, I would end up doing two degrees at the same time, because I figured if I was going to be there, I might as well get as much bang for my buck as I could. So you're coming out of school, you say, okay, I've got the master's, got the MBA, and then you also had the website up and going, and or you still had that going, or we're doing a bit of work with your wife, and started out doing things part-time with food consultancy. So you had a lot going on. So maybe walk through kind of, now as you've got the master's, the MBA, you're coming out of school, kind of where did you head from there?
So really started my MBA and then focused on just four bars for about a year. I worked for some sales and then I worked for a pet food company as well. And in that, I've always kind of done part-time consulting work for small businesses, medium businesses. It was really more of a people will come to me and say, "Hey, need help with X, Y, and Z. Can you help?" And I would help. In the December of 2023, I was laid off from my job. So then that gave me the chance. I said, "Well, I've been doing this part-time. Just Four Bars has been part-time. Why not just jump into it full-time?" So since January, I've been doing full-time work with me and my wife, where we've both been doing food safety quality assurance consulting. She'll do the sales outreach, and then I'll do the consulting piece of it using my technical expertise. And so that's really how we have, leveraged our skill sets together. Is I have the sales knowledge, but she also is very extroverted, very social. And then whereas I have a lot of the technical knowledge, I can do the actual consulting piece while she does the sales piece.
Well, sounds like a good setup and a good arrangement now. So now, if I remember, you started out doing kind of the consulting part time, and that's morphed into a full time thing. But you're also doing the food bar alongside of that, or in addition, or kind of pursuing both those. So walk us through kind of how you split your time, or kind of how you run those in parallel.
Yeah, most of it is really the consulting business just because that takes up a lot of the time, but it's also a little bit of a more viable business for us because the problem with the fruit bar business that we're running into is you have to make a certain amount of money in Oklahoma, and then you have to have a food safety plan. Well, we're under that amount, so we don't have to have a food safety plan, but that means that we're not federally inspected, so we can't ship across state lines. With the
Hmm.
consulting business, we can do that. It's borderless. We can consult for all 50 states. We could even do consulting for like Canada or Mexico, just depending on what their needs are. Obviously, the laws differ, but there are certain things in the food industry, like third-party audit schemes, that are universal for every country. So it really allows us and gives us more flexibility. So we've been focusing more on the consulting piece and then mainly doing just Four Bars on the side and just trying to support the local Oklahoma City community.
Awesome. Well, sounds like plenty to kind of keep you busy and multiple things going on, which is always a fun thing to juggle. So now, if you were to kind of say, okay, that's where you guys are a bit at today. Now, if you were to kind of look out into the next 6 to 12 months and kind of say, okay, here's where things are headed. Where do you kind of see the balance, and where do you see things headed between everything?
I'd like for us, so right now we're starting another project where we are starting a farm too. So really the goal would to be when we use just Four Bars, we can use ingredients that we grow ourselves and kind of have a, sustainable or a locally farmed option for those that are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma in general, want to expand our reach out to Tulsa and places like that as well. Additionally, I think the biggest thing that we have here is a food safety consulting. We're trying to build an application that has like a virtual consultant.
Hmm.
So one of the things is when you look at like ChatGPT and other things, you can find answers to pretty much anything. The problem is with ChatGPT is that some of the answers for food safety are inaccurate. And also with food safety consulting, there's a lot of very niche problems that we face. So really the thing is we want to build an app that can allow you to get answers in real time for food safety issues that you're facing. But at the same time, if you need to talk to a person, you can also request that person to talk to you and come and say, "Hey, we need to talk about X, Y, and Z."
Makes sense. And so now you say, okay, so kind of with that in hand, is it looking to kind of combine that into more of a SaaS, software as a service,
Mhm.
or as an online platform that people can then use, and then supplement that with live or in person, or kind of how do you see that playing out as far as now as you build that out?
Yeah, I would say more like a software as a service, and then really having the option to request like an expert. So the example I think of when I created my LLC, there was a website that I went through that you could do it completely virtually, didn't have to talk to a person, but then they also are a law firm. So you can go and say request help from an attorney, things like that, and then you can schedule time to talk to them. And I think that's where ultimately I want our platform to go because I
Hmm.
think that you can get the virtual help that you need, but then also at the same time, while you're getting that help, if you need help from a person, you can get that help too.
Awesome. No, it sounds like definitely a great direction ahead and a lot of opportunities between the consultancy, still working on the food bars, and then looking to build the platform to expand or for expanded reach and be able to help additional people. So it sounds like a fun place to be and a lot of opportunities yet ahead. So with that, now as we've kind of reached the present day of your journey and even looking a bit into the futures to where things are headed, great time to transition into the two questions I always like to ask at the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I always like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
Um, I think the worst business decision I made was that's a really good question. I don't know. I think and so I'll preface it by saying I try to take all of my mistakes and view them more as lessons.
Hmm.
I think one of the worst business decisions that I could have made was jumping into a business when I wasn't ready. I think that, however, at the same time, like I learned a lot of lessons from that. Like when I was doing financial consulting, I kind of jumped into it and I started making, a lot of money. Like I think my first day, or it was a lot of money at the time, like I made like $200. I was like, wow, this is, as a student, it was more money than I made a day at that time. Problem was, didn't have the legal structure set up correctly, didn't have my entity configured, and then down the road when started getting those things set up, it caused a lot of roadblocks and headaches and things like that. So I think more or less one of the worst decisions was not being educated on what I was doing and actually taking the time, just being a little too overzealous and just jumping into things and not fully understanding what I was doing. I think in general, those are what have led to pretty bad decision making.
No, and I definitely get that. That's kind of hard, one that's hard to get excited about the business, the opportunity you want to get started, and there are plenty of things that you might not know right on the front end, and that's kind of the cuts both sides. If you knew everything that you're getting yourself into when you got the business going, you would never start, and yet
Yep.
there's sometimes the things that you're not aware of or don't know, or the things that can hold back the business or otherwise lead to some of those mistakes that you have to resolve on. So definitely an easy mistake to make, but a great one to learn from. Second question now that I like to ask is, so now if you were talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you give them?
I think it's patience. You have to be very patient. Things don't materialize immediately. I think it took us before we even got into our first store from the time we created our idea was probably like 4 years because we created the idea in 2019 and then we didn't get into our first store until 2023. So it took us a really long time. And even with that, we had trouble with now we're in retail stores. So now we're learning firsthand what it's like to deal with retailers, what we need to set a clear MSRP. How can we have clear communication? Those type of things are what led us to really evaluate and think about how we're going to proceed with just 4 bars. So I think having that patience and understanding that things don't materialize immediately is something that's very crucial when you're starting in business, especially since, nothing's guaranteed. The one good thing about when you have a regular 9 to 5 job is you get, you clock in, you get either an hourly wage or you get a salary. With business, unfortunately, none of that is guaranteed. So you really have to be able to withstand a lot of risk and be able to tolerate and have a lot of patience as well.
No, I think that's absolutely right. And I think that you always go, or everybody thinks they're going to be the exception to the rules. The entrepreneur that you can hear as many times as other people saying this will take more time, money, and effort than you think, and maybe you should double that or those type of things. And yet, I think everybody says, well, yeah, but I'll be the exception. I'll get everything just perfect on the front or on the very first try. You get into it, and 99% of the time, everybody figures out there's a reason why everybody has to go through that, and yet it's one of those great lessons to learn that you just have to learn along the way. So I think that's definitely a great piece of advice. Well, now as we do wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, so you could email me at marcus@fsqahelp.org. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. So my LinkedIn is IN/MX Washington. And then also if you just search my name, Marcus Washington, and then there will be MS, comma PCQI on the end. That was how you can find me. Also, our website is just 4 bars. So just and then the number 4 and then bars.com. So those are the three main ways that you can reach me. And also, if you see me on LinkedIn or, see me out at an event, feel free to say hi. I'm always looking to make new connections.
Awesome. We'll definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, make a new connection. If nothing else, make a new best friend. So, with that, thank you again, Marcus, for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you, the listeners are out there, you have your own journey to share, and you'd like to be guests on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses to help them along their journey to success. And on that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup, your small business, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Well, thank you again, Marcus, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.